Hello, football fans, and welcome to the Bombs DFS NFL main slate picks for Week 8. Doing things a little bit different this week, not 100%. I can go live on Sunday morning. I'm definitely going to try to. We've got some Halloween parties for kids and stuff like that, so not sure there. So I wanted to make sure that I go over my top picks here, kind of give you guys some, a look into why I'm liking the plays that I do. So I am doing this pre-recorded video on Friday afternoon to go over my picks. So first of all, this week we've got 11 games on the main slate. We've got two teams in a bye, the Chiefs and the Chargers, so we do lose some good plays there. We also have the Ravens and Buccaneers going on Thursday night. The Ravens came away with the win. Tom Brady's now lost 3 games in a row, and that hasn't happened in a while. And I believe, I'm not sure, I have to check on this, but I think Russell Wilson is still doing stretches and workouts on the plane headed to London. Not real sure on that. But yes, there is another London game. The Jaguars, which would be London's team, they played there the most. They're kind of the team that they've adopted as their home team, if you will. That's going to be 9:30 a.m. Eastern, 7:30 a.m. my time, Sunday morning. So that one's off the main slate as well. So we're not going to get to play Travis Etienne, who is taken over after the trade. James Robinson went over to the Jets, because Breece Hall is out for the season now. So we're left with 11 games in the main slate. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Bring that up. Before we do, if you're not a member of Bombs Fantasy Sports, you can get over to patreon.com/JagerBombs, and for $10 a month US, $14.50 Canadian, you can get access to our NFL cheat sheet, top rankings. We're going to go over the cheat sheet here in a bit. I also have my top rankings on there. I've got tons of content going on in the chat, the Discord chat as well. We've got news channels to keep you up to date on injuries, as well as multiple coaches to help you with lineup construction, bankroll management, and all that sort of stuff. For $20 a month, $37.50 Canadian, you can actually get all of our sports for the price of just $2. So we are covering UFC, PGA, NBA, NASCAR, tennis, MLB, which is coming to a close here. College sports, college basketball starting up soon. We're in the middle of the college football season. NFL, soccer, covering UCL, EPL. Dane's even covering some UEL in there as well. And then we've got our NHL package as well, with that season going full bore right now as well. So get over to patreon.com/JagerBombs to get your subscription and join our winning team today. So something I'm going to do with the video here, it might go a little bit longer. So what we want to do here, and what I will do, is I'm going to add timestamps as I go through the matchups, the team matchups, the quarterbacks, the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses. So if you're looking for, you want to come back to the video and you're looking for just my specific thoughts on tight ends, you can just quickly go down into the description of the video and into the top pin comment below the video here, and you can actually just click on the timestamp and head to that section of the video, just to keep it a little bit easier for you guys. So you don't got to sit there and listen to 45 minutes or try and click through and find the section where I'm talking about specific players or positions. So with that, let's dig into the slate here. We've got, it's a little bit different than last year. The totals are down. Obviously, we know the scoring is down a little bit this year, so we're not seeing a lot of these totals in the 50s, not seeing a lot of team totals upwards of 28 to 30 points anymore. But we do have a couple games here that do stand out above the rest. A little bit of I guess you could call it a Vegas total tier. Miami at Detroit, number 1 at 51 right now. Miami's a 3.5-point favorite. And we've got Miami as the top team in terms of projected implied points right now. Arizona is going into Minnesota. Minnesota's a 3.5-point home favorite. That game's at a 49. Minnesota's number 2 in implied points at 26.3. Then we've got Las Vegas going into New Orleans. Las Vegas is a road favorite here, -1.5. 49.5 total in that game. So those 3 games are going to be the ones that are probably going to be the most targeted, I guess you could say, for your, core fantasy plays, the highest owned plays. There's going to be a couple sneaky ones in here. Like you can see, Philadelphia and Dallas are right up there in projected points this week, simply because they are such big favorites. Low total games, but pretty big favorites here. And then after these 3 big games, we're looking at, that's into Sunday Night Football. We got the Giants at Seattle, 44.5 points here. Seattle's a 3-point home favorite in that one. We've got San Francisco at the Rams, 43 total. San Francisco's a 1.5-point road favorite going into Los Angeles. And then we got Pittsburgh at Philly, like I talked about, 43 total. Philly is a 10.5 home favorite. So with that, let's dig into the quarterback position here, talk about some of my top quarterbacks for this week. So right there at the top, we've got Jalen Hurts. up against Pittsburgh. He's 8,300, so there's quite a difference in tiers here in terms of the quarterback pricing. Jalen Hurts is just far and above the rest, and it makes a lot of sense. They are 10.5-point favorites, so there might be a little bit of concern there that, like we've seen earlier, and I mentioned earlier videos and earlier live videos this year, that Jalen Hurts is one of the best first half fantasy quarterbacks out there. The problem is Philly has been just trouncing on everybody. So his fantasy points in the second half actually go down quite a bit. This could be one of those games, but I still think he can get it done in the first half. He's got 77 rushing attempts, 12.8 rushing attempts per game, so it gives him that little bit of a high floor. Total of 300 total yards per game. Now, the one concern there is on DraftKings, you're looking for those bonuses, 100-yard rushing or the 300 yards passing. 100 yards receiving, but he's not getting that, obviously, which he kind of is going to split those in terms of his rushing and passing, but he's clearly the number one quarterback on the slate going up against Pittsburgh. They're 29th in passing defense, 24th in fantasy points against the quarterback, so he's definitely up first. And then after that, in terms of ownership, I actually think, and as you can see here, fan share tags over here on the side. Now, this is not showing the sentiment, so there are players that have, good tags versus bad tags, depending on what sites like them as a good player, what sites are fading. And I also do that content curation for Fanshare Sports. So if you want to get into Fanshare Sports and check out all of the information associated with these Fanshare tags, head over to fansharesports.com, use promo code Jaeger, and you'll get 20% off your subscription. But Tua is definitely the most mentioned going into Friday afternoon here right now. Makes a lot of sense. We've got a high total game. Looks like it's going to be close. Miami's a 3.5-point favorite. Team, like I said, total of 51. Team total of 27.3. He's got two elite wide receivers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. He doesn't need to bomb it down the field, but he has this season. We have seen that 8.6 yards per attempt is pretty high. It's a leader on this slate, obviously. 12.8 yards per completion. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are two of the best yak yard wide receivers in the league, so they can actually help him. And we've seen that with the backup quarterbacks in there, Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson, that they were designing plays for especially Tyreek Hill kind of behind the line of scrimmage to allow him, to take some pressure off the quarterback, to get some quick passes out there, but also to allow Tyreek Hill to go ahead and use that yards after the catch that he is so good at. Now at $6,200, that is $1,100 cheaper than Hurts. I think the ownership is going to be there on Tua for sure. Someone mentioned in chat earlier today that it could be a little bit dangerous going with Tua. Tua chalk. Is that going to be good chalk? I honestly think it is going to be. Their offense ranks number 3 right now versus the number 22 defense, and Detroit is the ranked 29th in fantasy points to quarterback. Like I said, he's also got Raheem Mostert in there too, who's been catching some balls and taking over in the backfield. So I do like Tua. Right there, smack in the middle, is Kyler Murray going up against Minnesota, who has been good offensively, but unfortunately terrible defensively, which leads to some high-scoring games, obviously. I think Kyler Murray, he hasn't really topped out here yet and give us his ceiling game, but what he has done early in the year, he's given us a pretty solid floor. He's only thrown for 300 yards once so far this year, multiple touchdowns in just once in his last 5 games. He hasn't thrown for 3 touchdowns yet this year, but he's given you a solid fantasy floor of 17, which is about 2.5x. So we could deal with that in cash games, and I think this might be the week where we see the Kyler upside game. Now, I'm sitting here watching my Call of Duty Modern Warfare download on download day, but so that's maybe a little bit of a narrative going against Kyler Murray, but I think that's solid floor, and I think we can probably. This would be the game, if there's going to be, where he reaches his 30-point upside going up against that Minnesota secondary, and the pass rush hasn't even been that great either. So I think this is a week where he can go, and I think he may fall in a little bit lower owned with Tua being very popular or people paying up straight up for Jalen Hurts. He kind of falls there right in between. Now, some other quarterbacks that I like, we got Kirk Cousins in here. I think he's going to be a little bit lower on. He might be the pivot off of Tua this week, going up against Arizona. They're 25th in pass defense, 27th in fantasy points against the quarterback. He's got an elite wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, a nice secondary piece in Adam Thielen. KJ Osborne's not really been talked about a whole bunch, but he's been solid in the slot as well. Irv Smith, we'll talk about him when we get to tight ends, but he's been a Pretty solid passing option, progressing really nice as a young player in that offense as well. And then we got Dalvin Cook and Raheem Mostert. Alexander Madison in the backfield, who's been catching passes as well. So he does have some weapons there. They are passing a lot, as you can see. They're throwing 62.7, almost 63% of the time, which is up there in the top 5 in the league in terms of passing. Looking at his player card here, the volume's been up and down. 46, 41, 38, 41, only 30 last week against Miami. Didn't really need to throw a whole bunch in that game either. Multiple touchdowns in 2 of his last 4. He hasn't thrown for 3 touchdowns in a game yet. Again, going up against Miami, I think you could take either side of these quarterbacks. And for me, if it's in GPP, I'm going to take the lower-owned option. I think both Tua and Cousins have elite pass options to go to. I think this could be not the same side of the game, but looking at the same price range here, both have elite pass options to throw to. Both of these games could be high scoring. Both are facing bad defenses. So if Kirk Cousins is going to be, say, half the ownership of Tua, I think I'm going to make that pivot in GPPs. Cash games, I think I like the safety a little bit more with Tua here over Cousins. Cousins just hasn't been as consistent as Tua has with his passing options this season. Looking at some value options here, I think there's going to definitely be some ownership. As you can see, they've been mentioned quite a bit, Geno and Daniel Jones. Now, my problem with these guys is with Geno, first of all, Metcalf is probably going to be out this week, so that takes away one of his big 2 passing options. Talk about some value options that I like for Seattle once we get to wide receiver. Daniel Jones, kind of in the same boat. He's got some up-and-coming guys. Steve Slayton has been good, as well as Wan'Dale Robinson has been pretty good, but they're both young guys, and it's just not a situation I'm going to attack for cash games. I think you could definitely go there for GPPs, but if they're going to get some ownership here, it's probably situations that I might just avoid, and probably in my GPPs either go up or down. Dalton is going to get the start here for New Orleans this week against Las Vegas, who's been terrible against the pass, 27th overall in DVOA against the pass, 32nd, so dead last in fantasy points to quarterbacks. And while he kind of seems like a blah kind of an option, he's coming off his ceiling game, 32 fantasy points here, threw it 47 times against Arizona for 4 touchdowns. He did throw 3 interceptions, so he's going to do that, and this may be a situation where you want to play Las Vegas defense against him and him as well, but that's not a place I'm going to be going. I do like Dalton. I don't think he's probably going to reach this 4 touchdowns and 360 passing yards by any means. I also like this, maybe looking at the Kirk Cousins, going back to the Kirk Cousins things, playing at Arizona now. Arizona is now going on the road. So I think this is maybe where we could see Kirk Cousins upside of 300-plus passing yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns, and that 30-point game for Cousins. But for Dalton, he put that up last week against Arizona. He gets an even better matchup against Las Vegas this week. He might get Michael Thomas back, unsure at this moment, but he's got Alvin Kamara to dump the ball off, who's been getting a ton of work in the passing game. Whether he's going to score a touchdown or not, who knows? He's been vultured a ton. But he's got the deep ball for Chris Olave. We're going to talk about him shortly as well, and why I really like him this week, pairing him with Dalton as well. So we do have some options there for him, very cheap. But if you really want to absolutely punt the position, Sam Ehlinger is going to get the start for Indy. We talked about it all season, where Washington has been stout against the run. They are 17th in DVOA against the pass, 22nd in fantasy points against quarterbacks. Ellinger's going to definitely see some chalk. Not something I don't think we need to go there on Fanduel, but the price differential on DK, this is definitely a cash game viable for me. I don't think I'm going to get there in cash games, but if you wanted to load up on the running backs, and we're going to talk about all these running backs here shortly, that might be a place that you want to go with Ehlinger. He also gives you that little bit of a running floor / ceiling. He ran a lot in college as well. He's got Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, who's coming along here. All those tight ends. Don't try and pick one of them, Mo Alley-Cox or Jelani Woods. Forget who the other one is there, but there's 3 of them that kind of split snaps and split targets when they're in there. So, but I do like him at 4K. I mean, we're only looking at 8 to 10 points, and we're going to be okay for cash games, and it's going to allow us to go and pay up for some elite players. So that's kind of the quarterback position. This week for me, I would probably rank them right now in my own personal player pool. I've probably got Tua, Kyler, Hurts falls to 3 for me, just simply because of the possibility of the blowout where his fantasy point ceiling is just going to be dropped dramatically. But for safety, I think that's where you want to go for safety. Probably on FanDuel, I'm going to end up going with Hurts number 1. But on DraftKings, I think I like Tua a little bit more. Value down here with Dalton and Ellinger. Kirk Cousins as a pivot off of Tua chalk here this week in GPPs. Moving on to the running back position. There is a lot of running backs we're going to want to pay up for this week. Unfortunately, we can only play 3 of them. So let's dig in and let's talk about them. First of all, we got Derrick Henry. He's probably going to be the highest owned running back up top here. There's just a lot of narratives going on. First of all, let's go over and just look at his recent games since they started feeding him the ball. It's getting cold outside, so that's Derrick Henry season. 20, 22, 28, and 30 rushes over the last 4 games. 85, 114, 102, and 128. He's scoring touchdowns at will. And what I like this season, he's actually getting targets in here. It wasn't great last week, but he rushed 30 times for 128. They didn't really need to throw to him. But in games where it's been a little bit closer, where I think this could possibly be a little bit closer game this week, Tennessee is probably not going to be throwing the ball a bunch on Houston. Houston's been very underrated in terms of their pass defense. So I think Derrick Henry's going to get 25 to 30 touches this week, 25 to 30 rushes, sorry. He's probably going to get an upwards of 25 to 30, probably even upwards of, he got 33 touches last week, 30 the week before. What do we got here? 25 the week before that. So yeah, 25 to 30 touches is probably a nice floor in terms of overall touches. And we can probably see him get up in that 15 to 20 to 25 receiving yards again this week. His floor, even with 128 yards, didn't score a touchdown last week, is 19.8. That is an excellent floor. We've seen his upside is 30. In these 4 games, it's probably even higher than that. I think he can probably get an upwards of even more. And the reason I say that, he has absolutely crushed the Texans lately. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet. I'm sure everyone has, if you've been paying attention, doing any research this week. And I see he's rushed for 200 or more rushing yards in 3 straight games against the Texans. So look out for that. He's absolutely crushed the Texans. So there's that narrative as well. So I think Derrick Henry is my overall number 1 running back this week. I think that may make Saquon Barkley a little bit lower owned. I'm not 100% how that ownership is going to pan out there. Some people you hear think Saquon. Saquon's been the key and pretty much the whole core of that New York Giants offense this season. And he gets Seattle, who's been 29th against the rush, 28th in fantasy points against the running back. He's catching the ball. He's running the ball. He is the main weapon in that offense. He's had more touches than Henry this season. Not per game. On a per game basis, he's actually about a half a touch less. He's got 250 more yards here, as you can see. 129 rushing yards per game. So very popular. 21 total opportunities in the red zone as well. So they're just using him absolutely everywhere. So there's a lot of safety there with both of those guys this week up top. You can definitely pay up for both of them. But like I said, you're probably going to have to go down to Dalton or Ellinger at quarterback, which I think is fine if you're going that way in cash games. Josh Jacobs and Alvin Kamara, both of them are still too cheap here. Maybe not Jacobs on FanDuel. He's actually been adjusted up to 9K, so I do like that, or don't like that as much for Jacobs. I'd probably end up going with Kamara here, 1,200 less. But both in the low to mid 7K range on DraftKings. Seems a little bit underpriced here. Jacobs has been a beast lately. He's questionable, limited in Thursday's practice, but he is expected to play. 143-plus yards in 3 straight, 20-plus rushes in those games, 3 touchdowns. So he's been touchdown-reliant a little bit, but that has hit his upside. Take away those touchdowns or even just cut those touchdowns in half, he's still giving you a very, very solid floor. They are favorites here, slight favorites in what's expected to be a close, high-scoring game against New Orleans. They're 22nd in rush defense, a little bit lower in terms of fantasy points against the running back, but that is because they have held them in check and inside that zone, haven't allowed them to score a whole bunch. Now, in terms of Kamara, Taysom Hill is a pain in the ass. We'll start there. He has taken so many touchdowns away from Alvin Kamara, but even with that, without scoring those touchdowns, Kamara's put up 27.4, 18.4, and 17.5 fantasy points. That's nearly 3x these last 2 games. That's like 4x here in Week 5 against Seattle. He gets another good matchup on the opposite side of that game going up against Las Vegas. They've actually been 8th in fantasy points, 8th in DVOA rushing but 18th in fantasy points. They have given up. If we slide over here and we will go look at the defense versus position, slide over to running backs, and we'll go look at Las Vegas. Should have had queued up. There we go. 14.7 rushing yards per game, but 4.2 passing yards. That's quarterback. I'm sorry here. Flip over here. 55 receiving yards per game to running backs, 7.9 yards per catch to the running backs. And that is Alvin Kamara's. That's where the key to his upside comes from. So Alvin Kamara at 7,100, he should probably be up. Both of these guys should probably be up in the Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. They both should be more than Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook's usage this year has just not been the same. They're using Madison. He's not getting the targets, so it's his season career low in terms of being targeted in the passing game. Alexander Madison's even getting some touches in red zone. He's not getting 20 touches very often. So the fact that Dalvin Cook is more expensive than Josh Jacobs and Alvin Kamara is a crime to me. So Jacobs and Kamara definitely there. So that's 4 running backs right off the bat that we absolutely love, kind of up there in the higher pricing. Going down, Ezekiel Elliott is out this week. I think he's been confirmed. I'll have to double check on that, but if not, he's very highly doubtful. Tony Pollard week is here, and he gets a great matchup too. So he's not only is he going to get all the touches, but he gets Chicago defense that is 29th in DVOA against the rush, 26th in fantasy points against the running back. And then we go down and we look at Raheem Mostert in that Miami-Detroit game. He's been doing quite well lately as well. Also questionable, limited, but expected to play here, so not concerned about the questionable tag whatsoever. 15, 18, 14, and 16 rushes, 69, 113, 49, and 79. He's been involved in the pass game here as well. The yardage hasn't really been there until last week. Caught 4 or 5 for 30. But he's put up 20-plus points in 2 of his last 3 that's over 3x return at 5,900. And in this game versus Detroit, if I think Mostert's going to be a little bit lower owned because of the running backs that we talked about up top. And a lot of people are going to be on the Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill stacks. So I think this may be a leverage spot in that game, saying that maybe Miami gets ahead early, gets ahead by 7, 10, 14 points. And they end up running the ball a ton. We could see Mostert get up in that 18 to 20 rushes, 100-plus yards to get you that bonus, get it in the end zone, while Tua maybe has like 220, 250 passing yards, only 1, maybe 2 touchdowns, and Tyreek Hill and Waddle both don't reach 100 yards. Maybe Gesicki steals the touchdown, that sort of thing. Mostert may turn into a great GPP play here. I like him as a core play because I think the volume is going to be there regardless against Detroit defense, which is 31st in rushing and 31st in fantasy points against the running back. Brian Robinson, a little bit down here at the bottom. The value running backs this week aren't as great. Going up against Indy, Washington, this is probably a game they win. So if you wanted to do like the Ellinger, Pittman, run it back with Brian Robinson, thinking that Washington is going to go ahead and win this game, that may be a correlation stack that you want to run in that game script. It is a good matchup. Indy is 23rd against the rush and 21st in fantasy points against running back. Brian Robinson has been excellent so far since he's returned. Tyler Algier probably going to be GPP only. Both of these running backs in this Carolina-Atlanta game. It's a low total. Atlanta is a favorite here, so probably favor Algier a little bit more than Foreman. But Foreman is Chuba Hubbard, right before I went and recorded this show, was ruled out. So I think Foreman is going to probably end up being the top value at running back. He looked excellent last week. I ended up being off of him in the end, going up against Tampa Bay, who looked like they were really good against the rush, but they got pounded by Carolina, who had just traded Christian McCaffrey. Foreman got 15 carries, 118 yards, targeted twice, turned that into 27 yards. I don't think he's going to rush for 7.9 yards per carry against Atlanta, but he's definitely going to be popular, and both of these guys I think are nice values. Foreman's definitely got the harder matchup here. Atlanta is 5th against the rush, while Carolina is 21st. So I think for me, Algier's probably going to be a little bit higher on my value list than Foreman, but it's very close between those two in this game. Okay, moving on over to the wide receiver position. Up here at the top, Tyreek Hill, talked about him a little bit before, going up against Detroit. who has been terrible against the pass. You could fit Jalen Waddle in there as well. They're both been the most popular guys, close to the most popular guys that have been talked about around the industry. For me, my number one guy right now is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. He came back and stepped right back into the role that we expected him to with Kyler Murray. Targeted 14 times, caught 10 of them for 103 yards. I just totally see him getting 10 to 12 target floor this week with upwards of those 14 again against that terrible Minnesota secondary. So he's definitely going to be number one for me here. Chris Olave, I mentioned. Why his price really hasn't gone up a whole bunch, I'm really not sure. He has just been absolutely amazing. 14 targets, 6, 7, 13, 13. Week 1 wasn't great for him with 41, but he's had 50 or more yards in 5 straight. He's had 200-plus yard games in here. In the games where he didn't have 100-plus yards, he had a touchdown. He catches the ball deep. Like, look at these averages per catch in here. So something I wanted to look at was Las Vegas and how they defend the deep ball. And we go over and look at that here on NFL Savant. So I go up to pass type. I just change it to deep up there. Completion, defense yards, 2022. We come down here and look for Las Vegas, and they are 10th. 12th in deep passes allowed this season. So definitely looking at Chris Olave as a top play. And if you're playing Dalton, it's Dalton and Olave here is where I'm going. So he, even with, people were concerned with him a little bit with Dalton last week. Well, it turned into 7 for 14 for 106. Didn't score the touchdown, still put up almost 21 fantasy points. So Olave is going to be popular. Definitely like him. A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson, I think, are going to be my pivots. I talked about Kirk Cousins. If I'm playing Kirk Cousins, I'm playing Justin Jefferson. He's just absolutely amazing going up against Arizona, who's 25th against the pass. And if we go look at the 50 points against wide receivers for Arizona here and kind of just figure out why they rank so well. Let's have a look here at Arizona. Slide over to wide receiver. They are 11th. Simply because they've only allowed 3 touchdowns to wide receivers this season, which has been very good. So they've been very good in the red zone, specifically against wide receivers and not allowing them to score. That could definitely change this week. Justin Jefferson has been an absolute beast. If he's going to be half the ownership of Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, I'm game. Same kind of goes with A.J. Brown here against Pittsburgh. The only reason I have him as a GPP only here is because what I talked about, this looks like a game where Philly could just go out and absolutely smash Pittsburgh, where they're not going to need to throw to Brown. That really caps his upside. That just adds a little bit of a risk and makes him more of a secondary play for me this week. Same with Devonta Smith, same thing. He's got that deep pass ability, but again, his upside could be limited with a possible blowout for Philly in this game. Brandon Cooks, if you are running a Derrick Henry heavy lineups this week, you're probably going to want to run it back a little bit in some of those. I think it's going to be a close game. Houston, Brandon Cooks hasn't really shown us that upside yet. But if we go look at Houston's wide receivers, there was Nico Collins. Looks like he might be out here. So Brandon Cooks could, he could eventually get up into that 7 to 10 catch range, 100-plus yard game and a touchdown. He showed us some upside here, 18.7, catching all 7 of his passes for 57 and a touchdown against the Chargers. I think we could possibly see a game like that again, and if he gets up over that 100, gives you that bonus as well. You're looking at that 20 to 30 fantasy point game. So if you get Cooks in there, who gives you some salary relief, and he gets that 100 yards and a touchdown, and you get Derrick Henry in there and he rushes for, say, 100 to 150 and a touchdown or 2 touchdowns, that is a huge upside coming out of that game. And you really, you could honestly just run with those 2 players. You could go with Davis Mills, but I'm probably not going to go there. But I do like running Cooks in lineups with that. And then I also like Chris Moore. I've got him highlighted on the sheet as well. He's been pretty solid, 9+ points in 2 of his last 3 here. I think he's going to see some extra run if Nico Collins does end up being out in this game. So that's another place I like going here. Rondell Moore in that Arizona versus Minnesota running in the slot is a good matchup for him against Minnesota. Talked about how bad their defense has been. Wan'Dale Robinson is another one. He runs primarily out of the slot, so we never really like to run him against teams that defend the slot well. Seattle is 6th in fantasy points against wide receiver, but 23rd in passing. So we want to break that down a little bit more, and we want to look at NFL Savant here and look at yards down the middle of the field. And we find Seattle ranked 10th in yards allowed down the middle. So this is a good matchup for slot receivers. So Wan'Dale Robinson makes a lot of sense, especially at only 4,700 on DraftKings. It can deal with 5,900 on FanDuel for sure, but I especially like him on DraftKings this week, and I think he fits into our lineups quite well. You could even run that back. You could do double stack with. You could even get Daniel Jones in there and go Daniel Jones, Wan'Dale Robinson, Saquon Barkley, run it back with either, let's say, Tyler Lockett, Marquise Goodwin, who I've got labeled down here as a value play. If DK Metcalf is out, I do like Marquise Goodwin. You could also run, if you think Seattle's going to win this game, which this does currently, they have Seattle as a 3-point favorite. You could run Kenneth Walker, who's been absolutely amazing from the running back position as well. I didn't talk about him in the running back section, but there's multiple ways that you can game stack this New York Giants Seattle. And I don't think it's going to be the favorite in terms of stacking this week, in terms of popularity and ownership. So getting, 3 to 4 player game stack out of that one could be beneficial. And that's something we could see in the in the optimal lineup this week, especially seeing as we don't have any Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Unfortunately, Jamar Chase is out, but that's the Monday night game. Halloween, how key is it, or how odd is it that on Halloween they get the two teams with orange helmets, Cincinnati and Cleveland, on Monday night? Anyways, moving on away from the Monday night game. Other guys that I like down here, Carolina with Terrace Marshall, I think could come on a little bit. We'll go look at Carolina's situation at the wide receiver position here. DJ Moore, obviously, is getting more with Christian McCaffrey taking away, 15 to 20% target share. DJ Moore looked good in his first game without him, 7 for 10, 69 and a touchdown. PJ Walker, I was wrong about that last week. I didn't think PJ Walker was going to allow DJ Moore. I didn't think we were going to see a DJ Moore game with PJ Walker. And PJ Walker looked very well, very good last week. You got Terrace Marshall in there as well, 3,500. 2 of 3 for 31 last week. So he's got 30 or more yards in 2 of his last 3. It's been a decent floor, nothing special. More of a punt play if you really need that salary savings to, jam in those top quarterbacks and you're playing a top wide receiver or a top quarterback in there as well. Talked about Chris Moore on Houston a little bit as well. Now let's go over the tight end position, which is my least favorite position this week by far, and I'm going to tell you why. George Kittle gets a tough matchup against the Rams, who are number 1 against tight ends this season. Darren Waller is questionable, probably not going to play, and if that happens, that does open up Foster Moreau as a value play. Zach Ertz, with DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup, his target share goes down dramatically. We've seen it last. He only got 4 targets. Caught 2 of them for 21 yards after just being so consistent the whole entire season, besides week 1. He did catch a touchdown there, which did say he was weak. But other than that, he's been just consistent week in and week out. Hopkins comes back, demands 30 to 40% target share. Zach Ertz is all of a sudden the forgotten man. Definitely not going to be a core play for me, but I probably want some in GPPs in a possible shootout versus Minnesota. Mix into your Arizona Kyler Murray stacks. Dallas Goedert, tough matchup. Well, for 2 reasons here. 1, the blowout potential, where they may not have to throw a whole bunch. 2, Pittsburgh has been 6th in fantasy points against tight ends. So a couple reasons not to have Dallas Goedert as a core play. Tyler Higbee would be my favorite here. People might be scared off of that. I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. Right now, he's the most mentioned tight end on FanShare, going through the curation there, going through podcasts and videos and stuff like that. 4,200 is a decent price, coming off a terrible game, 1 for 2, 7 yards. But as you can read down here, some of the reason may be the injury that he was going through came to that. I'm hoping that maybe lowers his ownership a little bit coming off that bad game. Now, in terms of matchup, it's still not a great matchup. San Francisco's an elite defense. We know that. They're 10th again in fantasy points against the tight end. But I think just looking at the concentration of targets in the Rams offense, and we're going to go look at the NFL Savant. We're going to click on the Rams here, and we're just going to have a look at the target share. Talk about this a lot during the season on the live shows and in chat. When we look at concentration of targets, we've got 53% of the overall targets coming from Matt Stafford, going to 2 players in Cooper Kupp, 32.8%, and Tyler Higbee at 21.8%. No other team concentrates their targets to 2 players quite like the Rams do. So that's one reason I do think Tyler Higbee gets back into that 5 to 10 targets. I think he can probably get there. Only 4,200. If he was upwards of 5K, someone I'd probably fade just based on maybe last week in the tough matchup. But with that target share that we just talked about, I think Higbee can definitely be targeted in DFS. Irv Smith Jr., I think, is going to be a popular play this week, 3,500 in this possible shout here. He has looked pretty good, pretty solid for his price in that Minnesota offense. He is like the fourth, fifth option, unfortunately, but he's had 4+ targets in 5 straight games, upwards of 8 targets against Philly there in the game they got absolutely smashed. I'm going to try and forget about that one. Got in the end zone twice in those 5 games. He's not really getting the yardage, so he would be more of a cash play for me. I'm not sure the upside is completely there. This 14.6 against Philly where he got in the end zone 36 yards, 5 catches, that was like his ceiling this season, and you're really borderline pushing 4x on that one. So he's more of a player that I think I would target as a value for cash games this week. Noah Fant has been mentioned quite a bit this week in that Seattle game going up against the Giants. They're 22nd in against tight ends, which is really nice to see. Just not too excited about using him, and that's really it. Tanner Hudson got mentioned a couple. Only got him on here once, but I've actually him now a couple times being mentioned as, you just want to go straight down and completely punt. But tight end, really not crazy. It's probably something I'm going to wait until, I got my initial rankings up over here on the top targets tab. And again, if you want to get a look at my top targets tab, get into the Discord chat and hear the Sunday morning when injury news finally drops, inactives, actives. Get over to patreon.com/JagerBombs, and for $10 a month, you can get an NFL package. You can get the cheat sheet here, top targets, access into Discord, multiple coaches, that sort of thing. So make sure to do that, because I think that's where I'm going to decide on my tight end. It's going to be a very last minute thing for my final tight end rankings, just to kind of see where the injury news falls. One guy I didn't talk about, TJ Hawkinson. He's questionable, did not practice on Thursday, maybe limited, but he didn't have an injury tag early in the week, so that could be a little bit scary when guys are not on the injury report until later in the week, picked up something in practice. We don't have a whole lot of information on him. I'm going to have to wait till Friday injury report comes in after the video here, so make sure to check on that in chat as well. But he's someone I'm probably going to target, especially if one or both of DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown are out this week. If one of those two are out or declared that they're not 100%, TJ Hawkinson, we've seen what he can do when those guys are out. That was week 4 against Seattle. 8 for 12, 179 and 2, 43 fantasy points. I don't think we're going to see that ceiling game from him ever again, but 30 fantasy points is definitely not out of the realm if those players are out, because he's going to be heavily targeted. Moving on to a couple defenses that I like this week. Right up at the top, we've got Dallas Cowboys and San Francisco 49ers would be my number 2. Actually, due to the price, 49ers are probably going to end up being my top defense here. They absolutely went off against the Rams in their last meeting 3 weeks ago, I believe, 4 weeks ago. So it was a month ago. 7 sacks. They followed that up with Carolina with 6 sacks. Only 3 sacks over the last 2 weeks here. So their fantasy outputs have been down. They got smashed by Atlanta, which was very unexpected. KC also smashed them, put up 44 points. But going up against the Rams here again, I don't think they're going to hold the Rams to 9 points. I think we're probably going to see, at least 14 to 21 points, somewhere in that range. But I think that's fine if they're getting in and sacking them 3-4 times. So I am down with that. Looking at the matchup here, they have the 3rd best D-line versus the 26th best O-line for the Rams. There's a huge differential there. That's only number 2 behind the Dallas Cowboys. 29 sacks this season. Chicago's allowed 27 sacks. We got 12 takeaways for Dallas versus 11 giveaways for Chicago. We got the number 1 D-line versus the dead last 32nd ranked O-line of the Bears. That just lines up so well. Most times people aren't paying up for defense, so I think Dallas could possibly come in a little bit under-owned here. So a stack that I do like running with Pollard being popular is running that with the Dallas defense as well. Probably not going to run it back with anyone from Chicago's offense. I just don't think I'm absolutely going to touch that at all. So I think San Francisco is going to be higher owned for sure, just because of the pricing gap, especially over here on DraftKings. 900 can definitely help you upgrade another position in terms of running back or wide receiver. The Jets, I think, make a lot of sense going up against New England. New England hasn't given up a lot of sacks, but they've turned the ball over a bunch. So probably more of a GPP play from the Jets standpoint. But looking at how they've been doing lately here, multiple sacks in 4 of their last 5 games, 2, 3, 2, and 4. Last week versus Denver was a pretty blob, but they still give you 7 fantasy points, which is 2.5x return. So that's definitely, could be viable for cash games, but with the O-line in New England not only giving up 12 sacks this season, I'm probably going to look more to a GPP pivot off of the 49ers in some of my lineups, like in that range. And then where I want to punt this week is going to be the Commanders. They're probably going to be chalky down here, 2,600, 3,400 on FanDuel, 19 sacks this season. Indy has given up 24 sacks, which I think having Ellinger in there is a little bit better. Like I said, he's a running quarterback, so he may be able to run away from some of these sacks a little bit. But being a rookie quarterback, again, I think that's going to help push the ownership for the Commanders. They're the 7th best D-line, and the Indy's O-line just hasn't been great, ranked 23rd this season. So that would be my top value defense of the week. Thanks for tuning into the video, and make sure if you want $50, I should have mentioned this in the opening, but I did not. If you are looking to win $50 cash this week, I'm running it back this week. All you need to do, smash that like button and comment with your top QB, wide receiver, and running back. So give me 3 players, your favorite at each of those positions. And if they all score a touchdown, QB should be pretty easy, unless you pick Matt Stafford. Or don't pick whoever DK is running up on their odds. That may go bad. But if all 3 of your QB, wide receiver, and running back score this week, and you get chosen, I use a random generator to choose one commenter, one person from the comments below. If you get chosen and all 3 of your players score a touchdown, I'm going to double that, so it'll be $100 cash I will send your way this week. So make sure to smash the like button, give me your top QB, wide receiver, and running back. And if you want to copy the cheat sheet, top targets, access into our Discord, head over to patreon.com/JagerBombs and join our winning team today. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the chat room and in the winning picks on Sunday. Cheers, everyone.